about the public web services that we have used in our tuned application. So realistically, there are millions of songs and artists, and it is impossible to store this amount of data into the database before, like right at the start. So we have used the public web APIs of Spotify, which enable the user to search for any artist or song or album. So what we are doing is we are searching the data, we are inserting it into the database on a need basis, and then we show it to the user. So let's look at some of the Spotify APIs that we have used in our project. So this is the Spotify for developers, and it is a very interactive tool, and it provides a lot of information on how to use the APIs. There's a really good amount of documentation over here. So let's see a API that enables users to search. So this is a search API. Here I can insert a name of any artist that I want. I have to give the type for artist. So here I can even give album or track, anything I want. So let's say I'm searching an artist. Limit 1. So I want one result from my query. And let's say I try it. So here I am returned with a list of user named Rihanna, and I have the images of the artist, and songs of the artist, genres of the artist, followers, and all this information. So this search can be applied to actually anything, like say track. I do track and I do a fix you. So if I search, so I get the track information. So I see that the artist name is the Coldplay for Fix You. So we have used the search API to get information about three things: the albums, the artist, and the song. And for then later getting some other additional attributes of the search, like the popularity of an artist, or followers of the artist, or the popularity of the song, we have used individual APIs. Like here we can get a particular artist by ID. So the search API returns us with the Spotify ID, and using that ID, we can get additional details of a search result. So these are the APIs that we have used. Now let me show that how did we actually use it in our project. So initially we created an app on Spotify, which gave us a client ID and a client secret. So we use this client ID and client secret to generate a 64-bit encoded authorization ticket. So let me give you an overview of the authorization that we have used. So this diagram depicts the client credentials flow. So what we have is a client ID and client secret. So we are passing it to the Spotify, which gives us the access token. So if our client ID and client secret matches, they provide us with the access token, which is valid for 1 hour. So we are storing this access token in our database, and we are constantly checking if this token is still valid by storing a timestamp for the token. And once we have the access token, we can request Spotify to give us query of our search results using the same access token. And this is the API that helps us get an access token by giving it the the 64 base 64 encoded client secret and client ID. So now let's see that how we have used in our application. So I have created a special Spotify utility which does nothing but connects to the Spotify using a proper authorization or an access token, and then returns us with the expected results. Like suppose there's a search artist API. So what this is doing is it is hitting the spotify.com search with few of additional parameters, like I want two artists to be returned, etc. And then we are using the JSON parser, and specifically this library, the jway.jsonpath.json, to actually get to pass the JSON file and get each of the attribute. So like here you can see that we can get the artist name, external URL, popularity, etc. So we are just returning and storing this in our database. So once we have this stored in our database, let me show how the controller works. So this is a Spotify fetch controller. So this API is going to be called whenever a user wants to search for an artist. Let's say this is the API for artist. So initially I check my DB, that does my artist repository have an artist with the given name. If it is empty, that means the artist is not present in my database. Then I will call the Spotify save controller. And if the artist is present, I simply get the artist from my database and I return the artist. So if the artist is not present in the DB, I call the artist save artist in DB function. So this method does nothing but calls the Spotify.search artist function, and this search artist function actually makes a call to the Spotify API and returns the result, which in turn returns to Spotify save controller, and it saves the artist in the database. So once this artist is saved in the database, we fetch the artist and then return it to the website. So this is an overview of the web services that we have implemented in our application.